Welcome to the GSMC Business News Podcast, the show dedicated to keeping you up to date on all things concerning business, technology, and the stock market. Get a head start on the day as we keep you updated on the latest goings-on Wall Street, money, jobs, and technology. If you're looking for a podcast to keep you informed and ahead of the game in business, the GSMC Business News Podcast has you covered.
Hello, and welcome to the GSMC Business News Podcast on the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Paula DuPont, and today we're going to be talking about a few different companies and how they're doing. The first of which will be a report that came out recently by CVS, and also some information from Walgreens as well, that is not only indicative of their earnings and how they're doing as businesses, but they also point to some things we're going to expect to see in the future and some trends based on what's happened in the previous few months. So I think that's going to be real interesting. We're going to talk about that in our first segment. Then later on, we're going to talk about the Gap stores reopening, Peloton, T-Mobile, the newspaper industry, and also a little bit about TV, specifically Fox. So we'll get to that in just a moment, and thanks for joining us tonight. I saw an article today about CVS Health Corporation and them talking about some of their first quarter results and even a little bit about April. And to me, the story validated something that I've been feeling, but I hadn't seen reported anywhere. And that is that during this time, this pandemic, when we know the incredible pressure and demand that first responders and hospitals and doctors are facing dealing with the virus, that it's got to keep a lot of other people away, people who may have other issues going on. And there's a couple things going on there. One, you have people don't want to go to a doctor's office where they might pick up the infection and be there among other sick, and perhaps don't want to risk it and raise an issue during this time. And the other thing is that doctors are probably dissuading people from coming in at this time. And you also figure that many hospitals, particularly in densely populated areas, are either canceling or prohibiting the schedule of any elective surgeries or procedures, and in some case treatments, unless it's a life and death kind of situation. So as it turns out, when CVS was talking about its earnings and the activities, its sales activities that it's seen, they warn that we're going to see a big surge in new health conditions and new health problems when the pandemic is starting to subside, or at least the concentration of it in terms of healthcare outreach. They had said that now CVS owns, of course, the insurance giant Aetna. That happened in the last couple of years. And they have information based on both Aetna's performance as well as CVS pharmacies. And they say that patients in April received fewer new prescriptions, as many have started fewer new treatments and seen doctors less frequently. And they have also said that store and prescription sales dropped in April following a pandemic-driven surge in business earlier in this year. Aetna, the insurance arm of it, has seen a decline in commercial contracts as businesses are either having to lay off employees or trying to cut costs, so they are not entering into new commercial type contracts. During the first quarter of this year, CVS saw higher sales as the pandemic prompted consumers to fill more routine prescriptions. So earlier on, when the pandemic was first breaking out and a little bit of panic was setting in, there were huge sales in the stores, and you had people going in and getting prescriptions filled and even converting them to 90-day prescriptions so they could limit the timing of having to go into the store again. Virtual visits to the company's urgent care clinic grew 6-fold, while prescription home delivery grew 10-fold. Online prescription refills requests grew 50%. The Aetna unit saw a drop-off of around 30% in use of healthcare services in April. So, as I mentioned, some of this is, again, because there's been a pause of elective procedures and also people getting treatments that, are not life-sustaining, I guess you'd say. There is a feeling, though, that in this quarter that we're in, the second quarter, the trends will unfortunately continue because, as you know, the stay-at-home orders are only gradually being lifted and in phases. So it's going to be a while before people are feeling comfortable going back to the doctor's office for routine things or strange symptoms that are presenting themselves that aren't necessarily in the corona category, although that list seems to keep changing and growing as far as symptoms are concerned. But, other issues that develop, people are probably still going to be waiting to have those addressed until they feel it's safe enough to go back into the doctor's office and that they know that there will be resources available to them should they need them. So it's a little discouraging, and you really hope that no one's, secretly suffering, the start of a really serious condition that really should be treated right away. And by the way, I mentioned, I think earlier, that Walgreens also had similar observations based on its recent performance. They had stronger than expected sales during their latest quarter, even though that the company's operating income had fallen 19%. Walgreens did say that there was that April drop-off, where initially in March there was a big surge in sales and prescriptions. However, as we got into April, people had stocked up, they had what they needed, and so things dropped off a little bit. But apparently not too much because in terms of sales, because they did seem to do okay. And, in terms of CVS overall, they had reported first quarter net income of $2 billion, which was better than expected. I believe it was $1.4 billion the quarter before that. So they did improve. They had also said that their revenue rose 8.3% to $66.8 billion from the same period the year before. So, interesting. I think, we may see more results that validate that, and hopefully as some of these restrictions are lifted and treatments are once again happening and elective surgeries, hopefully people can then address any issues that they might have. Of course, we don't want people to have to need those things, but the reality is that they probably will. We are going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about the Gap.
You really can't underestimate the importance of having the right creative work for your brand or your product. Whether it's a logo, a website, a book cover, or an ad campaign, you really need a quality design to make that big difference pop and deliver your overall engagement and success in a competitive market. That's where Design Crowd comes in. Design Crowd has over 750,000 designers from Sydney to San Francisco ready to help you with awesome creative ideas. They make crowdsourcing work for you. So if you need a logo or you're working on your creative branding, you can go to designcrowd.com and post a brief describing the design you need. And then within about 2 to 7 days, you'll receive up to over 100 different designs from designers around the world. Then you pick the best design and approve payment to the designer. So you're only paying for the design that you want. It takes a lot of the guesswork out of freelancing and out of crowdsourcing. And you don't have to be a huge company like Harvard Business School to use Design Crowd, although they have used it as well. You can start a project on Design Crowd for as little as $99. And if you go right now to designcrowd.com/health and wellness or enter the promo code health and wellness on their website, then our health and wellness listeners will receive up to $150 off of your design project. That's designcrowd.com/health and wellness or entering that promo code health and wellness.
Are you looking for a podcast that gives you all of the latest news from the world of finance? Then check out the GSMC Financial News Podcast. We'll delve into the ups and downs of the stock market, changes in the economy, and news from the world of real estate and technology. From breaking news on the New York Stock Exchange, NASDAQ, or the overseas market, to updates on the bond market, if there's money to be made, we'll cover it on the GSMC Financial News Podcast.
Hi, I'm back. And as I said, in this segment, we're going to talk about the Gap. The Gap recently announced that they were going to begin reopening some of their stores as early as this weekend. And, of course, that's going to vary by states' reopening plans and when they can do that. But per the reopening plan in Texas, they are going to open some stores there beginning this weekend. So Gap had furloughed a lot of its employees, so they will be bringing those back who worked in those stores that they are reopening. And they are, as you'd expect, going to put in place different new procedures and requirements for customers as well as for their employees. They're going to do more frequent cleaning. They're going to have plexiglass at the sales desk to put a barrier between them and the customers. They are going to wear masks. They're going to require their customers to wear masks. And they're going to have little tables at the front door with hand sanitizer on them so that people can sanitize as they enter the store. What's interesting is, along with all their typical clothing offerings, they will sell masks. They're going to have 2 packs of masks available for people to buy. I don't know. I know they're going to be cloth. I haven't heard whether they're going to be denim or what, or logoed. I guess that wouldn't be too far out of the realm of reason that they would do that. They have they've done okay. I know that the Gap actually had weak sales before the pandemic hit. They have had some success with online sales during this period. It doesn't sound like they've set the world on fire with them, but they have had that. Last month, they raised $2.25 billion in secured debt. So they did not have to obviously file for bankruptcy or have to draw from other sources. So it sounds like they're looking to try to regain a little momentum by at least getting out there and selling. Now, overall, the Gap operates 3,300 stores. That's worldwide, but of course, most of them are in the United States. And it's going to be interesting to see. This is sort of like a test case for clothing brick and mortar to see how they do. Now, the fact that their clothing is casual, maybe they will do pretty well with that, as opposed to department stores that might have more career wear. Given the new changes in the work world and so many people telecommuting, they still do have some nice sweats, I think. I actually haven't been in a Gap in a little while, so, well, no one has actually. But, you can get some comfy clothes there and clothes that would be appropriate to wear in a casual attire office. There are those that do have those standards. So it will be interesting to see how they're able to benefit, or how they're positioned for people coming out of the pandemic, how they do it in Texas. So we'll see what happens there. Incidentally, Nordstrom department store announced recently that they were going to permanently close 16 of their 116 stores. So I believe they had said earlier during the pandemic that it may be likely that they were going to have to make some drastic cuts, reduce their costs as a result of the pandemic and what it was going to do to sales for the year. So that's one of the measures that they're taking. There's no indication yet of which stores those are, but that's something that we're likely going to see going forward. And incidentally, I sort of zeroed in on Texas before because that's where the Gap said that they would be reopening stores this weekend. But actually, in California, the governor has said that with the this next phase of the reopening plan, some stores and other businesses will reopen, I believe, as it could be even as of today, May 8th, where the businesses have to be those that can support curbside service and only curbside service. So maybe that's why California wasn't mentioned in the item that I read about the Gap reopening, because they are indeed reopening the store itself. So it's going to be interesting to see how clothing stores handle that with curbside service. So I guess that would mean you would order online or in advance somehow, and then just drive up to pick it up. But you figure for a clothing retailer, it's more about the experience, about going into the store and seeing the different items displayed and maybe how they're displayed and what they're paired with and accessorized with, that gets people to maybe to make the purchase. They can visualize it better. And not only that, but you have people who maybe didn't set out to go buy something in a clothing store, but walking by, they might go in and just browse and then end up buying something. So it's going to be a little different, because you figure if you know exactly what you want from a store, to call or order it online and then pick it up, you could do that with any online retailer. I mean, you could do that with Amazon. It just, you might have to wait, a couple days or so to get the item. The store is really about the experience. So, like I said, it's going to be interesting, but, the idea of reopening in California and Texas and any other state isn't necessarily to open up according to the best model for that type of business. It's making that kind of business available to customers in a safe way. So, I guess that's going to be the prevailing approach then, probably with other states as well. So we are at a point, once again, where we are going to take another break. And when we come back, we're going to switch gears. And it's kind of a little lame pun, because we're going to talk about Peloton. So see you in a minute.
You really can't underestimate the importance of having the right creative work for your brand or your product. Whether it's a logo, a website, a book cover, or an ad campaign, you really need a quality design to make that big difference pop and deliver your overall engagement and success in a competitive market. That's where Design Crowd comes in. Design Crowd has over 750,000 designers from Sydney to San Francisco ready to help you with awesome creative ideas. They make crowdsourcing work for you. So if you need a logo or you're working on your creative branding, you can go to designcrowd.com and post a brief describing the design you need. And then within about 2 to 7 days, you'll receive up to over 100 different designs from designers around the world. Then you pick the best design and approve payment to the designer. So you're only paying for the design that you want. It takes a lot of the guesswork out of freelancing and out of crowdsourcing. And you don't have to be a huge company like Harvard Business School to use Design Crowd, although they have used it as well. You can start a project on Design Crowd for as little as $99. And if you go right now to designcrowd.com/health and wellness or enter the promo code health and wellness on their website, then our health and wellness listeners will receive up to $150 off of your design project. That's designcrowd.com/health and wellness or entering that promo code health and wellness.
Do you work in the world of marketing and advertising? Are you a media buyer or the owner of an agency? Have you been looking for a podcast to help stay on top of all the goings on of those worlds? The GSMC Marketing News Podcast is dedicated to keeping you up to date on all things concerning marketing and advertising. Get the latest marketing news, from what major businesses have planned for the coming year to the newest trends in advertising, from podcasts, digital and streaming, to the old standbys of radio, television, and billboards. The GSMC Marketing News Podcast has you covered, whether you're a marketing agent or a business trying to expand your brand.
I'm back, and as I mentioned, we're going to talk about Peloton. Now, we've been hearing a lot about what businesses are doing really well and thriving in this stay-at-home environment and which ones aren't. Netflix, Disney Plus, Hulu, some TV programs, gaming. Those are all things that have been doing pretty well because, let's face it, that's what we do when we have all this time on our hands, or at least that we're home all the time and don't have social lives outside of the home. So there's those of us who are the Netflix bingers, and then there are those of us who are the exercise junkies, and they're going to find a way. Maybe there's a crossover. Maybe you can be both. Maybe you do one as a repentance for doing the other. Because let's face it, if you're going to binge watch, you might binge snack. Very high likelihood of that. Nonetheless, we've seen people getting very innovative in videos on social media and other places where people are doing really some extraordinary things to innovate, make up for what they can't do in the gym. But as expected, companies like Peloton that make the very sophisticated bikes, they are doing pretty well. And in fact, they said that their quarterly sales for the first quarter this year went up 66%. Now, that's even despite the fact that Peloton bikes cost $2,000 a piece, that there is a subscription service that you have to pay for that enables you to watch these workouts on your bike. And there's also the fact that the sales went up despite the fact that there's like a delivery delay. Can take 7 to 9 days before you get it. So it's just very interesting that they did show this big jump, because $2,000, I mean, I guess it's all relative, but it doesn't seem like a cheap kind of a thing that you just, have that kind of money laying around and say, well, you know what, I'm bored, so I'm going to get a bike. But perhaps people do. We all know about that poor woman who got it as a gift from her husband because he shamed her into exercising more. You remember that whole debacle some months ago. Anyway, as I said, Peloton did very well. They feel they will continue to do pretty well, especially because initially they had to cancel the live workouts that they had. They record these workouts from New York and London, and then they're streamed to the bike. So in April, they had to close that down. However, they have since started them again as trainers are recording them from their homes. So they caught on to that, which a lot of people have been streaming from their homes into work, depending on what you do. But Peloton's revenue jumped to $524 million for the first quarter. So that's not bad. Now, going forward, in the second half of the year, where other companies who haven't been doing great in this first part of the year are expecting better results in the second half of the year and expect to recover, I believe Peloton expects that they will slow down in terms of sales. But, we will see. I know that there's been a lot of advertising for the Mirror and other things like Peloton to get people interested, and it's a perfect venue to do that is for the people who are sitting home binging and watching TV to get a little guilt about these great devices that this Mirror, puts a person in your house to show you how to exercise. And, it's the privacy of your home, and you can do this, and, you can start off slow and not be intimidated and all those great factors. So there is a lot of appeal when you think about it of being able to do this from home, at least getting started with it. And then, who knows in the months ahead. I've seen actually a few different news pieces about gyms being a little worried, not only being anxious to get back and in business like most other business owners, but also wondering when they do go back, will there be the same demand? now that people have found alternative ways to exercise and keep in shape, including walking. I think we're seeing that a lot, where people can do that. They are getting out and walking, and it's a good little break from being inside all day, and certainly gives a literal breath of fresh air when you've been cooped up. And so now that, or not now, but at the point when we are able to go back to the gyms, it's going to be something to see as to, if they'll be as crowded. I suspect they will be. I mean, for a lot of people that I've talked to, that's one of the first things that they want to do when they're allowed to do that. And yet there are others who say they're not sure when they're going to feel comfortable being back in a gym or being back at a pool that they belong to and were avid swimmers at. What's it going to take for people to feel comfortable back in those environments? And I know that, most small business owners and gyms are taking a whole new approach to cleaning, and I'm sure with gyms that the standards will be even higher for them to maintain a clean environment. But it's about perception. It's about what customers feel when they go there, if they go there. So, my suspicion is that companies that still continue to sell products that you can use from home may still do pretty well, even beyond the sheltering in place orders. So we will see what happens with that. But, I for one, don't know how else you do work on different areas of the body. You can't, there's only so much stuff you can use, and I can't lift the sofa with my feet. I've seen people do that, lifting kids, putting paint cans on the ends of like a mop or something. And it just doesn't cut it for me. So, yes, you'll see me back, but I'll probably go during the middle of the night, since I go to a gym that's open 24 hours. I'm not going to want to be seen right away. So anyway, there's that. And we are going to take another break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about T-Mobile.
Hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
So I'm back, and while we were all focused on the pandemic and the news that we were reading and hearing every day, and trying to pay attention to all the things that were happening around us and our jobs, and we're worrying about all those things, while we were thinking about all those other things, those little things, in the background, T-Mobile finally completed their merger with Sprint. Now, you remember this is something that had been in the works for a while. There was some contention about it, but They got, I think, the final approval back in February, and then the closing and thus opening of the new combined company happened April 1st. So in the meantime, T-Mobile talked recently about how they did in the first quarter and even in through April, but they did not combine their results to include the new Sprint customers that came along with the merger. T-Mobile has said that they do expect that they are going to be impacted by the pandemic, and in fact, have been in some ways. However, overall, they've been doing pretty well. And in fact, as of Thursday, May 7th, their stock was up 8%. They, with its new subscriber base, their customers, they are beating AT&T and Verizon by a lot. Their stock, as I said, has risen, where AT&T and Verizon, they've been clamoring on the other end quite a bit recently. They have the largest number of postpaid phone subscribers of all the carriers, and I think that doesn't even include the new combination with Sprint, if I read that correctly. Now, they do expect that there will be issues, and it's going to take time. In fact, I think they're saying it's going to be 3 years before the companies are fully integrated together. I mean, when you consider the network that each has and trying to just integrate the networks, never mind all the systems and all the stuff behind the scenes, it's going to be a massive effort, and it is a massive effort. So it's keeping them quite busy. So they don't expect at this point to do a combined report to include the Sprint customers until maybe this summer. So probably not till after the second quarter would be when they'll start to issue their performance report at that time. 80% of the T-Mobile stores are closed because of the pandemic, and I think that's pretty much everywhere. When I say everywhere, I mean other mobile carriers as well. They have not been necessarily considered a life-sustaining business to remain open. So a lot of their stores have been shuttered. So a lot of their business has been online or over the phone. That's how they've been getting customers and handling transactions. Another thing about what T-Mobile is facing, T-Mobile and Sprint together as one company, is I mentioned that it's going to be a while before they are fully integrated, and they expect that it's going to take probably at least 3 years till they're fully integrated. Alongside the challenges in integrating the two systems is this whole drive towards going to 5G. So that's one of the big appeals of combining these two networks, is that each has a foothold in a certain 5G technology that, and I know I'm probably going to get out of my depth pretty quickly on this because it can get very technical, but as I understand it, there's different grades of 5G connectivity, and currently T-Mobile has launched some integrations or some work being done in the New York City area and in the Philadelphia area for customers there who will then be able to be connected to the the other company's network. So in other words, like in Philadelphia, apparently, Philadelphia T-Mobile customers who have phones that enable them to connect with 5G, because that's another big piece of it, that they will be able to connect in through a higher bandwidth that's part of the Sprint network. And it's a higher bandwidth, faster. And so already Philadelphia customers are supposed to be experiencing that. At the same time, New Yorkers are being connected to a different system, or they will have access to that as well. It uses a different type of technology that has come with the T-Mobile network, the existing T-Mobile network, that is to be available to customers there. And again, it's about the phone. So there's, according to one thing that I read, a lot of the Sprint phones that customers have are not 5G enabled, and in time they are going to have to convert to a different phone. And it's likely that at that time there will be some sort of deal offered. I mean, I don't have any direct information from the company to say that. It's just that with customers that move over through this merger, are likely, they're going to be incented some way, even if it's just their own incentive to be able to connect to this higher, faster network, that they will have to get new phones. And it probably the same would be true for those in the T-Mobile, the existing T-Mobile client base, who have phones that aren't 5G enabled. I know that later this year there are new models of phones expected out. I'm not sure if it includes the newer iPhones. There's going to be a few different options with iPhones later this fall. I had mentioned in a previous podcast that Apple delayed the launch of its iPhone 12 instead of it being in September, or where they take orders in September for October. It's pushed a month. So they'll probably start taking orders in October for November delivery. But there are some other models, other versions of the 11 that are supposed to come out in the fall as well. So there's going to be more options available. Customers, no matter who your carrier is, you're always kind of pushed to get the next best thing. That's just the nature of the business and our nature, and we want the fastest connection we can get. So we shall see. Right now we're going to take another break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about the newspaper industry, specifically the New York Times.
Are you tired of the same old news? Are you sick of the seemingly endless political spin and negativity? The GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast is a weekly news podcast covering all the top positive and uplifting news stories. We cover stories that will inspire, uplift, and remind you of the good in the world. Tune into the Golden State Media Concepts America Still Beautiful podcast to get all the great and positive news stories of today. Download the GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Maybe it's not appropriate to say the pandemic has a silver lining because it's, with the gravity of the situation and how many deaths there are and how much disruption there's been, it's really difficult to think that there could be anything that would be a silver lining about this whole thing. But with that sensitivity in mind, I would have to say that the one good thing happening during this time has been the access to a lot of free stuff, whether it's entertainment or it's news or music. There certainly has been a lot going on with that. Companies launching and giving, free trial service or subscriptions, at least initially, and then switching over to a paid platform. Well, I guess we're hitting that wall now, that hard wall, that paywall. A lot of the newspapers now that were allowing for free coverage, and some of them still may be doing that where it comes to coronavirus information and updates. But in other areas where they've given access to other articles, information, some of the companies are back to putting up the paywalls before you can get any further with the coverage. That, and you're also seeing, separate emails. If you subscribe to different publications, there are those pleas for, to contribute to journalism and, keeping it going and kind of enabling the noble fight. At least I'm seeing that, and I'm getting those emails, and I've gotten other ones from, the Washington Post, and you see it on other places like The Verge, also asking for donations for people to contribute. Well, anyway, that said, the New York Times has done pretty well, at least in terms of readership during this time. Not so great with ad revenues, but that's something that we're hearing a lot about across the board with the media and with TV and commercials. Ad revenues are down. It recently came out that the New York Times has had a rise in its digital readership, and they had seen this happen, in the first quarter, which of course is just covering the first part of the pandemic. It's hard to say how many parts to this pandemic there will be. We know it's extending now into the second quarter, and they expect the readership to fall 50 to 55% in the second quarter. They added a net new 587,000 digital subscriptions during its first quarter. They know that they will likely continue to have fairly strong readership through this quarter, this quarter now. But in terms of the ad revenues being down, and they said that they have declined by 15%, that they will probably have to try to rebound in the second part of the year. And that's something that's like a common theme we're hearing, is a lot of companies feeling that, the second part of the year, like companies are already saying they're not expecting good results for the second quarter, and that they're waiting for third and fourth quarters to recover basically and get towards normalcy. I hope they're right, by the way, and I'm sure all their investors do as well. But in terms of the newspaper industry and the hit that they've taken in terms of ad revenues, and yet again the increase in readership, you would certainly expect things to level out, as there will hopefully be not as many stories in the second half of this year, the coverage of coronavirus. We're hoping, right, that we don't have to still have, all these dire stories every day I mean, they really are enough to fill a paper and have every day. So we can only hope that as we get better, we get on our feet, that it will start to improve. And by the way, when I mentioned before that their net new digital subscriptions at the New York Times was 587,000, it actually, for total overall subscribers, so that would include those who get the print edition and also those who subscribe to some of their other kind of adjunct offerings, like the cooking and crossword puzzles, I believe, is the other thing that they have separate subscriptions for. But anyway, all of those things combined comes to 6 million, and that's what they had as of the end of April. So not sure that they're going to be able to sustain that through the rest of the year. And in fact, they have reported, the New York Times reported, that they probably will have some job losses at some point during the year because of this. Because, of course, ads drive the revenue for the newspaper, which, as someone who is a former reporter, not for the New York Times, unfortunately, but it's sad. It's really sad to hear. It always gets me not only when I hear about newspapers struggling and having to lay off staff, but also the fact that they have to get out and plead for donations and try to appeal to people's sense of integrity and wanting to have, the truth and have good information delivered to them regularly and reliably. And, I'm of that mindset too, that, we need this. And if ever there was a time to have something like this, something beyond blogs and social media and wherever else people are getting their quote unquote information, we need the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and, many of these other papers. And I look to the fact of what happened in China with the government throwing out Wall Street Journal and reporters from the bureau in one of the cities there, or actually from the country. I believe that they've been expelled from there. And, and I'm trying not to be political about this, and I don't think it is necessarily political. But the fact is that, we need journalists with, integrity to ask the tough questions and to do the digging for us, because how else are we going to get that information reliably and, available to all of us, and not just through the State Department or whatever other sources who would have information of what's going on in other countries. So that's my 2 cents about the newspaper industry. And I certainly hope that they can make it through this and ads come back. I would think the fact that readership is up as much as it is, not only for the New York Times, but for the other outlets as well, that really would be a great time and a great audience to advertise to. But of course, you have to have products to advertise, and, I know it's not that simple. But hopefully that there will be a matchup eventually of the two. So we're going to take a break, and when we come back in our last segment, we're going to talk about Fox and how they're doing and some of the struggles that they're having that are similar in terms of ad revenue. So we'll be back in just a moment.
The Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast, the show that gives you advice on everything travel. We explore places you've always wanted to go, as well as giving tips for traveling in those places. We'll give you advice on the best sites for travel tips, information, and discounts. Join us as we travel the world, explore cultures, and meet new people. The Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast has got you covered. Download the GSMC Travel Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
If you watch regular TV, any TV, you know that you haven't seen a new program in a while. If you follow any particular series, you're not seeing any new ones. You're seeing some reruns, the ones that you've already done, because they're not in production. Maybe the only new things you might see are, the late night hosts hosting from their homes, and even some of the morning newscasts doing their programs remotely. So you see that kind of thing. But in terms of a show keeping its integrity, you're not really hearing of them being in production right now for obvious reasons. However, when it comes to Fox and TV, where they have a lot of animated shows like The Simpsons and The Family Guy, where they're done in art studios and audio studios where the voices are dubbed, they've been continuing in production with them. So I thought that was interesting that their programming kind of allows them to continue producing fresh shows even during this time. So, and I haven't watched any of them recently to see if they're reflecting the current culture and if they're doing a dig on people broadcasting from home. I could see it if they did. I mean, it seems like a natural for something like, especially with The Family Guy. But anyway, Fox News recently talked about how it's been doing and how its revenue rose 25% in the first quarter of this year. The only thing is that, they still did have an advertising decline. And they're expecting that overall this year they could see a decline by as much as 50% for some of its TV stations. But they are seeing overall a big decline in ad revenue. So like the newspaper industry, probably like all media and entertainment, they're feeling it. And I'm not sure what it's going to take to bring ad revenues back, but I'm sure they'd be interested to know. The other day, I was talking about the Disney properties and how the ABC stations were doing, again, having problems with ad revenue, like Fox and like others, and how ESPN has been affected with the fact that there's no live sports going on. Well, at least not mainstream live sports. I had mentioned that ESPN was looking at broadcasting Korean baseball. And I thought maybe I was just late to the party and everybody knew about it, but apparently nobody else knew about Korean baseball either. And perhaps it hasn't been aired here before. I don't know. But they are planning to air games of the Korean Baseball League. And in some of the promotions I saw, they had pictures of people in the stands all around the stadium. It's a big effort when you think about it. And to make it look like it. So obviously they're not going to have a live audience, live group. So Fox, of course, Fox Sports, gets a large viewership from airing different sports. They are saying that they're not sure how much they really will be impacted because their big sports are postseason baseball and football. And both of those won't be happening till the fall anyway. So that should be interesting to see how they do with those sports. And again, whether we're going to have fans actually in the stands for them. But I'm sure there will be a way with football. There will be some way. I mean, I don't mean necessarily that there will be fans there, but in terms of how that there will be a season. I think pretty much that's a done deal, that there will be a season in some way, shape, or form in a televised way at the very least. The MLB, we're still waiting to hear what the plan is, and from what I understand, it's expected fairly soon that that Major League Baseball will come out with its plan for the season. And from what I've heard, it's looking like they want to start it on July 1, and where initially they had this idea of concentrating all the games in one location, one city or area, region, and then have all the teams reside there and play each other at a number of different fields in that vicinity. And then recently I've heard that it may still be in each city. And there's also been news about how they're going to combine the divisions and be more of a regional division. And everything's going to be changed around. It's going to be so different. Rivals will still be rivals, but they may be playing more often in this new mix. But I digress. But we are expecting to hear something about the baseball season and what happens with that. So with Fox, it's interesting. As I said, their programming, a lot of it's animated, and they're able to continue with that remotely without having to pull in talent to one location or do remote shooting or anything like that. So that may end up saving them. But again, the bottom line is ad revenues, and we have to have companies doing well and needing to do better by advertising and have the money to do it. That's the big question. So I think we've explored a lot of different things today, from media and entertainment to T-Mobile to the Gap and Peloton. We've covered all the bases, and I'm not trying to make another baseball pun, although it sounded like that. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. In any case, I want to thank you for joining me today for the GSMC Business News Podcast, brought to you on the GSMC Podcast Network. And I ask you, please go and subscribe at whatever venue where you subscribe for your podcasts. And also, please check out our Facebook and Twitter accounts and leave some messages for us, some feedback if you like. Let us know if you enjoy the show. And don't let me know if you don't enjoy the show. I don't really want to know. Just kidding. Be honest. So we will join again next week for another Business News Podcast. Thanks for joining me. Good night.
You've been listening to the GSMC Business News Podcast, part of the GSMC Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type GSMC into your favorite podcast app to find all of the shows from the GSMC Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, from business news to weird news. Please subscribe to the podcast and follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's podcast.